Afternoon, everybody. We're going to give people about 2 minutes to get in, and then we'll go ahead and get started. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. This is the 11th water use efficiency workshop that we've had. And do we have the, are we in the right place on the slide? There we go. All right, are we good? All right, well, thank you very much, everyone, for being here at our 11th Water Use Efficiency Standards Workshop. This is going to be a fun one. We're going to be summarizing what the State Water Resources Control Board staff shared. Their workshop was, I think staff talked for about 2.5, 3 hours. We're going to try and just do that in lost time in that and get your feedback on where we are and where we're going. So next slide. Next slide, here's our agenda. We're going to do drought update, standards update, and then we'll have breakout rooms and wrap up. Next slide. Hopefully we all know your Zoom rules, they're posted right there. Biggest thing for this one, there's a lot of people on here. Please make sure that you're on mute and so that we can hear the speakers. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to turn it over to Efren. He is going to give us an update on the drought and water supply conditions. And go ahead, Efren.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So my name is Efren Lopez. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm a water resources specialist at the San Diego County Water Authority. And today's presentation will provide you with a drought update, and this includes a water supply conditions update for water year 2023. So let's start with just some high-level overview. So Governor Newsom, he eased some of the drought restrictions that we were experiencing. He signed Executive Order N523 on March 24th. And what that did is it rolled back many of the unneeded drought emergency provisions. And these include, ending the 15% statewide voluntary water restrictions or water savings target. And it also ended the level 2 water shortage contingency plan actions. It did maintain some provisions that are needed, including the ban on wasteful water uses. So California, over the last couple months, water year 23, we've experienced 31 atmospheric rivers through March, and based on the Center for Weather and Water Extremes, this winter storm has delivered the equivalent of 1.5 to 2 years worth of water for much of the state in the form of snow and precipitation in the state. We've had a really cool water year too. So temperature wise, it's been very cool. Many parts of the state over the past 3 months have experienced temperatures, 3 to 9 degrees below normal. And this has been very helpful in maintaining the snowpack. Looking at the Northern Sierra snowpack conditions, this plot on the screen, what it does is it aggregates on the plot on the screen how the Sierra snowpack is doing relative to the historical average. And this lets us see how the snowpack is doing to date, as well as how much snow we needed to reach the average peak or the snow peak on April 1st. Highlighted in red, you can see this is water year 23. Currently, we are at 217% of normal conditions for this time of year. with 54.5 inches of snow water equivalent. Statewide, the snowpack is trending at 256% of normal conditions. Looking at the Northern Sierra 8-station precipitation index, this tracks 8 locations in the Sacramento River Basin. The 8-station precipitation index currently reflects 128% of normal conditions with 61 inches of recorded precipitation. For comparison, I added water year 21 and 22 on the graph here in green and in black, and you can see we're trending significantly above normal. Looking at the statewide snowpack levels, the California Department of Water Resources, they've conducted 4 snow surveys to date at the Phillips Snow Station located in South Lake Tahoe. The 4th snow survey was conducted early April 3rd, and it recorded 126.5 inches of snow depth and the snow water equivalent of 54 inches, which at the time was 221% of normal for this location. The April 5th snow survey is scheduled for May 1st, just because there's so much snow, they're going to do another one. The Department of Water Resources, they also announced an increase to 100% of the requested state water project water allocations, up from 75% in March. The last time that the state water project allocation was 100% was in 2006. Looking at major reservoir storage conditions across the state, water year 23, as we've seen, these 31 atmospheric rivers have made a big impact on the state reservoir conditions and storage. Lake Oroville and San Luis Reservoir are both over 90% of capacity, and overall major state reservoirs are at 104% of average. This is a graph of Lake Oroville storage and its volume. Currently, as I said, it's at 90% of capacity and 118% of average, with 3.18 million acre feet of water stored. The current water year is represented in red, and you can see it's trending significantly higher than it did last year and the year before. DWR is currently releasing flows from Lake Oroville into the Feather River. Currently, they're managing this at around 15,000 cubic feet per second. Looking at the Colorado River Basin conditions, precipitation is at 126% of normal. Snow water equivalent is at 170% of normal. Lake Mead is 29% full and Lake Powell 24% full. The Bureau of Reclamation released its April 2023 24-month study, and they project that conditions will provide an additional 9.5 million acre feet that will be released from Lake Powell in water year 2023. Soon, they're going to update the tables for Lake Mead and the surplus and storage outlooks, so stay tuned from that from Reclamation. Looking at precipitation here in San Diego County, Lindbergh Field has recorded 13.75 inches of precipitation for 150% of normal conditions, and Ramona has recorded 23 inches of precipitation for 167% of normal. Looking at NOAA's Climate Prediction Center 8 to 14 day outlook for precipitation, it indicates a incline towards above average precipitation for California for the next 2 weeks. And for temperature outlook, it indicates below normal temperatures for California for the next 2 weeks, which, as I said earlier, the cooler than average temperatures are great. They've helped build and maintain the snowpack. There are also discussions about La Nina conditions ending, and they've been in place for over 2 years and moving into an ENSO neutral, but they're projecting potentially El Nino conditions this summer and into the fall. Still a bit early in the season to see how that will play out, but that is what NOAA is reporting. And this concludes my drought and water supply conditions update.
Thank you, Efren. And it's a good transition. So we've moved on from the drought, and we're now looking at more of a response to climate change. This is the second major drought we've had in less than 10 years. And so I think we are seeing the new normal right now. So transitioning, we're going to go and look at the water use efficiency objectives that the state is developing. They're currently in the State Water Resources Control Board's in their process, and we'll kind of just go over what changes that they've made, what recommendations they made, what are the next steps, and things to kind of think about. So next slide. I'm gonna start with the water supply strategy that the governor put out in August of 2022. In that strategy, he had several different recommendations or targets for increasing resiliency. Included in there is one that that the state should reduce urban water demand by about 500,000 acre-feet by 2030. This is important because this is what the state board is actually using as kind of a target to make sure that their recommendations meet this target. Next slide. If you read the State Water Resource Control Board recommendation, there was this table in it. It was also included in their presentation that they did in March. And what they're assuming is that with the changes to their recommendation, that they would be meeting the 500,000 acre-feet of savings below 2022 uses, which is when the strategic plan was put out. Depending on what you're assuming as a baseline, that 500,000 could be calculated a couple different ways, but this is the way that the state board staff is doing it. The other thing to kind of keep in mind as we work with the state board and others on this and meeting this target is that this is only from the regulations. For the last 30 years, the majority of conservation has been voluntary and has not needed regulation. I have not found anyone that is currently calculating that they will likely meet their target that is saying, oh, I'm going to meet my target, I'm efficient, I don't have to conserve anymore. And so I think a lot of the conservation efforts that have been going on for decades will continue to go on even beyond what is required by the water use efficiency standards. Next slide. So I decided to share this slide. This was from the state board's presentation again. I thought it gave a really clear picture of what's in the objective and what's not in the objective. So what's going to be regulated is indoor use for residential customers, outdoor use for residential customers, any commercial, industrial, or institutional landscape areas that have a dedicated meter already serving them, and real water losses. What's excluded is CII outdoor use without dedicated meters, CII indoor use, apparent water losses, and other uses. Next slide. So digging in a little deeper, for the standard that they're putting together, they're going to have residential indoor, outdoor, real water loss. There will also be variances if applicable. And then if you're eligible, there's a potable reuse water bonus. And that will give you your service areas objective. Next slide. So where are we? We have the water use efficiency indoor standard that was, legislation was passed and approved in September of 2022. That's been determined. We have the water loss standard that was done in October of 2022. Those efficiency standards have been set. What we're working on now is the residential outdoor standard, the CII outdoor standard, variances, and CII performance measures. Next slide. You might want to bookmark this slide or come back at it, maybe print it up and stick it on your desk. There's a lot of acronyms in what we're doing, and this is a kind of a summary of what everything means. Urban Water Management Plan, or Urban Water Use Objective, special landscape areas. One that we've just kind of seen over, it's kind of a new one, is the landscape efficiency factor. So in the past, DWR used ETAF, evapotranspiration adjustment factor, to describe the factor that's going to determine how much water is applied to landscape. Under the state board's proposal, that is going to be shifted to landscape efficiency factor to recognize that it's not part of the UWUO requirements, the model water efficient landscape ordinance or a design standard, but it's a standalone standard that the state board is going to regulate. Next slide. So we're going to start with residential. Residential indoor has been set. It's already defined. We're looking at 2020 55 gallons per capita per day indoor use, down to 42 in 2030. One of the things to think about, and it did come up in the workshop at the state board, and when the legislation was signed to set these indoor standards, the governor also talked about having variances and doing additional studies. The variances are to make sure that if these numbers are going to impact significantly your recycled water program or your wastewater systems, that you can have a variance to adjust this. So as you're kind of thinking about how these standards will impact your agencies, this is a really important thing to start looking at. If you're concerned about your wastewater system, or will you have enough recycled water to meet the demand that you anticipate, or if you have a potable reuse program that you need recycled water for, that the water's already, you're using it twice, so it's already efficient, and you have any ideas on what studies need to address, go ahead and contact me and let me know, and we will work on making sure that those comments get back to the state. And then if we do any regional, or we do any collaborative efforts, if there's any potential to do collaborative efforts on studies. All right, next slide. Now we move to the outdoor budget. So the standard that the state board is proposing is the same as what DWR proposed back last year. The one big difference is they added a target for 2035 and knocked the efficiency requirement down to 0.55. The argument is that's a water efficient standard. That'll get us to plants on drip. That's indicative of what is described in current and UWUO standards, and it should be, and they believe that it's very, very feasible. One of the challenges with this is that there's still a lot of information that is not known about how much water is being used for residential landscapes. Without knowing how much of the dedicated meters are actually residential dedicated meters for common areas of multifamily residences or other areas, it's kind of hard to know exactly how people are doing based on the standard. The other change that the state made is removing the I&I buffer unless a water supplier demonstrated that it is that irrigable, non-irrigated areas are actually using water. To do that, water suppliers would essentially need to do another round of residential landscape area measurements and provide that information to the state. I'm going to pause real quick. If you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat or raise your hands, and maybe we can answer them real quick before we move on. All right, go ahead, next slide. Another thing that the state board added is that you can have a special landscape area in residential areas. So they're defining that as any area with edible plants or areas irrigated with recycled water. Again, a little bit of a tweak that they put on it is that they are excluding any non-functional turf areas. So again, I think this would be applicable if you have a multifamily unit, with common areas that are being irrigated with recycled water. It may be a challenge to determine is all of that area functional? Is some of it non-functional? How do you differentiate between what's functional and non-functional? Is it a fraction. So there's a lot of work that could potentially be required to make sure that you can define these special landscape areas. Areas with edible plants could also be a big challenge if you have a lot of people that do backyard gardens. And there's kind of a question about what is the feasibility of other than larger parcels with ag use, how you would find those areas with edible plants. Next slide. Looking at the state board's assumption, they shared this at the board meeting. This is what they're kind of assuming, what they're defining at this 0.55 mark is what they're assuming is feasible for all of all the residential customers within the state of California. So their example is low water using plants, irrigated on drip, a couple of fruit trees with drip irrigation, maybe a little bit of grass with overhead sprays, but really, really kind of a pretty prescriptive requirement to meet that 0.55. For those of us that have been in conservation for a while, I think this is an idea that we want to get to, but I think we all realize that we have a long ways to go. Another thing that is concerning about the 0.55 standard is that it pretty much assumes design standard factors. So you have overhead spray and warm seedings and grass. All of that is using design factors, and we know that life doesn't work as it's designed. Trees grow in front of sprinklers, and sprinkler heads get knocked off, and drip lines get holes in them and they leak. And so all of those things are going to be going to move us away from that 0.55 ideal number, and going to be something that we're going to have to educate customers about, that to meet this standard, we need to be vigilant about water use efficiency and our irrigation systems. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm going to pause again real quick. I can't see the chat, so I don't know if there are any comments or questions.
Okay. There's only one comment saying we are not getting any credit for our water sales being reduced by over 50% in the last 10 years. So it's kind of a comment, not necessarily a question, I believe.
Yeah, that is a common feeling, but one of the things to keep in mind is that if you have reduced demand, you're probably a lot closer or below this standard than somebody that has not made or is farther away from that. Next, so with that, we're going to go into commercial. Next slide. The State Water Resources Control Board also added a standard for 2035 for commercial areas. They added a 0.45 standard, and for new construction, they also have a 0.45 standard. Again, water agencies aren't responsible for new construction. So making sure that all new construction has this lower standard and is meeting lower standard as it goes on is something we're going to have to work with land agencies and others. Next slide. CII, for CII special landscape areas, there is a 1.0 factor. There's a couple of them. Most of them were included in DWR's recommendations. Some that the state board included and they did not is cemeteries built before 2015, botanical gardens and arboretums and things like that. Excluded from the object that is not a special landscape area is historic sites, reclamation projects, and ecological projects. Next slide. This is the final, one of the final areas we're going to cover. It's CII performance measures. There's 3 different areas of CII performance measure, and I want to take some time on this because I think this is one of the biggest changes that the state board made. A lot of DWR's recommendations were altered. In the three areas that they're making recommendations is for classification, mixed use meters, and for best practices. Next slide. So another question?
We have a question from Augustine Hahn.
Hey, yeah, I had a question about the last slide on the special landscapes. And I guess my question was like what the discussions are like at the advocacy level on the including recycled water under the special landscape areas, just because, you know, the way it's written right now, it seems like that recycled water is counting the same as potable. And, you know, agencies have made investments in recycled water to offset potable use. And so it just seems kind of funny that they're counting them the same, but yeah, just.
So for slide 30, they do have the 1.0 factor as opposed to the 0.45. So next, I'm gonna go to the slide 30. So areas that are recycled water do get that 1.0. The one change that the state board, one of the changes the state board is, again, they excluded non-functional turf. So, you know, if you have a park and it also has irrigated parkways around it, do you have some non-functional and some functional? There's also a lot of arguments that were made at the state board meeting is that, you know, people have already made these investments in purple pipe, and a lot of people make those investments in purple pipe so they can maintain their landscaping. And so you're not don't necessarily have another market for recycled water if you know you exclude this non-functional turf. And so at least for existing projects, it seems like the board might be open to including all of areas irrigated with recycled water at the special as a special landscape area, and then moving forward with new development, maybe make it exclude non-functional turf.
Yeah, I mean, I would go a step further and say it shouldn't be calculated in the water use objective, but yeah, I don't think they'd be happy with that.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think they included recycled water in the legislation, so we're stuck with that. But yeah, there was a lot of pushback on this non-functional turf and recycled water, and letters that went in from Aqua, Water Reuse, and others. The Water Authority put in a letter, all pushed back on this, excluding non-functional turf.
Thank you.
Yeah. Next slide. Okay, CII performance measures. So we're going to start next slide. We're going to start with classifications. This compares what the state board is requiring versus what DWR recommended. On here, this is all the things that are the same. They're very similar. Comments that I heard is that we were glad that there's an other category, and then there's also the mixed use property category. Sometimes when you have a commercial site that has retail mixed with residential or other things, that having those options for an other and mixed use are really important. Next slide. The difference is banking, financial, laundry, parking, technology and science, warehouse and storage, water recreation, vehicle wash, and CII DIMS, dedicated irrigation meters. So again, these are going to be a little bit of a challenge to figure out and make all your classifications, put all your classifications together. So this is going to be one of those areas that you have a couple years to comply with it. It's not all that different from DWR's requirement. I think having things mixed together like parking and you know, other areas might actually end up in a whole lot of mixed use areas. So we'll continue to watch this moving forward. Next slide. The next requirement that they had, and I think this is going to be another challenge, is that they moved the threshold for applying a dedicated meter or an in-lieu technology to mixed use meters. They moved it from a 1 acre requirement to a 500,000 gallons annually. So it's about 72,000 pieces of property that have to be evaluated and either converted to having a dedicated meter or giving an in-lieu technology. And they are open to different in-lieu technologies, but I think either way, it's going to be one of those things that is going to be, could be a heavy lift for some water suppliers. Next slide.
Augustine Hahn has another question on the slide, I believe.
Sorry, I got another one for you, Elizabeth.
Great.
In the staff proposal on March the 15th, I'm seeing that conversion would be 500 million gallons. I was just curious what the discrepancy might be.
Alas, it was corrected in the state board meeting that was a typo, and it is 500,000 gallons.
Gosh.
I like the 500 million personally.
Yeah, there's like 5 properties in the
We're pretty excited there for a little while, but yeah,
I thought that was a big victory for us, but yeah, 500,000 is, I mean, that's so low, I feel like, but yeah.
Yeah. So it's going to be and what would be helpful is if you have information about how much your mixed use meters are using and how many might be impacted, and what kind of lift that would be or how much time it would take. If you make comments to the state board, or even if you share them with me or one of the organizations, just kind of, the state board themselves is looking for specific data, and so the more we can say, hey, this impacts these agencies and it's going to require this amount of effort, I think it's going to be helpful in letting them see that this might not seem like a big deal, but it could be a very big deal to have to really implement and take a lot of resources and time to do. And the worst, and it may not actually result in any water savings. In fact, there's not a whole lot of real hard evidence that switching out from a mixed use meter to a dedicated meter is going to save water, especially if you're already efficient. So
Right. Yeah. And then like customers, there's like a $16,000 new connection fee, all these things. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll see if I can find some info for you.
Yeah, that's great. So, next slide.
You have one additional question. Jean Swargener from Lakeside Water.
Yeah, I'm glad that they put a threshold on it of the 500,000 gallons, but this can affect in a different way. Before with the acre, you don't have a car wash that is over an acre, so they wouldn't be required, but a car wash uses a lot of water. And same with like a laundromat, they might use a lot of water. They don't have a whole lot of landscape, but little strip of cactuses or something. So would there be some way to say, okay, this, little corner car wash that uses over the 500,000 gallons annually has zero landscape, in that there's no need to add an irrigation meter?
That is an excellent point, and I hadn't even thought of that. So I appreciate you bringing that up, because I haven't heard that comment before, but that is a really good one, is that if there are areas that aren't using a whole lot of water on their landscape, maybe it's something that can be considered, and maybe it's something looking at peaking or something like that can be added to the recommendation. Anything else?
No, not that I see at this time. Oh, someone asked about, can the slides be distributed? And yes, they will be sent out. So that's just a general comment to everyone else. But other than that, no, you are good, and we can go to the next slide. Oops, sorry.
Okay, the next one is the state board is requiring that for all disposable building as defined by the CEC regulation, which from my understanding, and again, I'm not super familiar with this, but that is most buildings. Water suppliers are going to need to identify the building owner and provide them with 12 months of water use in an ESPM format. So again, this is an extra step that's being added, and would love to hear comments on anything that, that could be challenging about this, and how much time it may take, and what are the resources required to use this effort.
So now we have two questions. So Lisa Quaylar commented, this one actually on the previous slide, I thought that the proposed threshold excludes processed water.
It does exclude processed water. You're correct.
Okay. And the next one is from Jean again at Lakeside Water. What is ESPM format?
It is, I cannot recall off the top of my head the exact acronym, but it is, you can see the
It's Energy Supply Portfolio Manager.
there you go.
But I think she wants to know what that format is.
I will get that back to you. We'll send that out with the slides.
It's just weird that the regulation wants us to send it in a format that nobody knows what it is.
There are some, I know of LADWP does this, and which probably makes sense to them because they're both a water and a energy provider. But I know it was also a challenge to set up to do this. So like I said, I will get you see if I can find an example of what the format is.
All right, and you've got one more question. Your question is from Augustine. How can we exclude processed water on a MUM or mixed use meter?
Very good question. I think that's one of the things that is going to be an issue. I think Lisa just put in the chat, I saw pop up that Lisa Quayler from put in the chat that so for car washes and laundromats, that would be processed water and therefore would be excluded from the requirement to switch out the mixed use meter, but that would also require you to go out and determine that that is a car wash or a laundromat. Of course, you have to do that as part of your classifications, and but you'd also have to kind of figure out a method of determining what the processed water is. So that's an area that we can bring back for maybe looking at that in one of our future workshops, how we can kind of look at some of that and find clues to what processed water is, or what's being used for process versus landscape. Next slide. Or any more questions?
Yeah, no, you're caught up now. Good job.
Okay.
Okay. We're good.
All right, this is the next thing that they have done. For each of the 19 classifications, for the top 20% of users within that classification, you have to have one BMP from each of the 5 BMP categories listed in the DWR proposal. For the top 2.5% of CII users, you have to have 2 BMPs for all 5 of those BMP categories. Any questions on that?
I don't see any.
Okay. So this is essentially saying you would have to come up with at least 90 different BMPs for those 18 categories. So CII performance measures, the timeline, again, at least this is spread out over a couple of years. You have to do your CII account mapping to find out what start measuring your landscape. You have to come up with your BMPs. So you have to develop a customer education program in the first year. You have to ID your top users. You have to come up with a program to do your BMP implementation. And then you have to do that implementation over 5 years after starting in year 2. For mixed use meter conversions, first you have to look at the landscape area measure and determine whether or not it's applicable. Under the landscape area measurements, this is actually an older slide, older table, I apologize. This is actually under the state board proposal. This would be the water use as opposed to looking at the size of the landscape area measurement. You can develop an in lieu technology implementation plan, and then you would have to, starting in year 2, either do the conversion or put in lieu. For all of that, there's going to be an annual reporting requirement. So anyone have any questions about this?
There's just a couple things in the chat, not necessarily any direct questions.
Great.
And Danielle, we'll get to your question about timeline at the end of the workshop.
Okay. Next slide.
Oh, never mind. There's 2 people that just raised their hands. Hold on. Let's see who they are. Just a minute. We have Gabriella Olson.
Yes, I was wondering, is there any regional program that would meet the requirement of the CII outreach, education outreach?
What I would envision is that for those that are part of a regional group, like for the Water Authority, for our agency, we're kind of looking at how we can help member agencies meet these requirements. I think the CII is a real area where you can kind of get the benefit of working together. And if we kind of all develop one set of BMPs, it might be easier than each agency trying to develop their own. But there is not, as far as I know, anybody that's meeting all of the outreach requirements for a region right now.
Okay, thank you.
And you have one more question, Brian Honjak.
Hojanaki.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, Brian Hojanaki, City of San Diego. Just want to reconfirm on the BMPs. So does everybody have to do that, or is it just if you wanted to do that BMP, or you can do the in lieu? Is that my understanding correct?
No, the BMPs have to be done by everybody.
Okay, I thought that was an option if you wanted to do in lieu, an in lieu technology. You could do that instead of the BMP.
You can use an in lieu technology to not have to replace your mixed use meter.
Right.
But in addition to the mixed use meters and addressing those, you also have to have a plan for BMP implementation, which requires you to have BMPs in 5 different categories. And then and the state board is recommending that for each of the different CII classifications, so those 19 classifications that they've identified, that you have to have one BMP in each time of the you have to have one BMP in each type of BMP category for the top 20% each of those 19 CII categories. And is that clear as mud now?
Yeah, that is right.
Okay.
Okay, no, that's good. I mean, I'll study it more, but I just want to clarify about the what was in lieu and what was BMP. What was the difference? So an irrigation alone account, just the CII irrigation, still needs a BMP?
I believe so, because it is under it's one of the classifications that the
Right.
state board has, yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You have to meet the standard with that, and you have to do a BMP on it as well.
Right.
All right, anybody else?
No, at this point, you are now caught up.
Okay. Next slide. We're going to do water loss, variance, and potable reuse. Water loss, I'm not really going to go into a whole lot of this. This is established already back in October of last year. I just wanted to point out that questionnaires are going to be due this year for your water loss standards. And then next slide. The state board did not make a whole lot of changes to the variances, but they did add 3. They didn't put a bunch of detail in there, so it's still, a lot of this is still to be determined. But they put in variances for pools and spas, trees, and for temporary irrigation. For the bonus incentive, again, your bonus incentive is going to be based on how much water is delivered to your dedicated irrigation meters and your residential accounts, divided by all of your potable water deliveries times your individual potable reuse, and that'll give you up to 15% up to a 15% bonus. And I see any questions on that? Okay.
None that I see at this time.
Next
Oh,
step.
Augustine rose his hands again.
Yeah, I've got a quick question. Do you know, like, is the state board willing to entertain any other requests for other variances? I'm just, the issue that we have with conserving water in our system is because we're gravity fed, any drop of water that we conserve on the residential customer end will end up on our water loss report as an authorized consumption. And so we don't get dinged on that amount on the urban water use objective. But that's a big financial burden for us. Like it's a big concern for us because that's non-revenue water that we're having to purchase, we're having to treat, but we don't collect revenue on. And so I was just curious. I know that the operations managers have been mentioning the issue of increased flushing. And so, yeah, I was just curious how the state board might address that issue.
There are variances that they're supposed to consider, and they haven't come up with any detail on it. And I think this might be what you're talking about, might impact you for the indoor standard, but I haven't heard about anything for the outdoor standard. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I mean, just in general, like what actually happens to the water when we conserve it within our system? We have to maintain fire flows and maintain water quality standards. So, we've been having to flush a ridiculous amount of water within the first 3 months this year.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good thing to bring up to the state board and to bring to their attention. Thank you for bringing it to mind. Any others?
Yes, there are 2 other participants currently raising their hand. Hold on, please. Oh, hold on. We have Jean from Lakeside Water.
Okay.
Elizabeth, do you think that the State Department would consider the CII BMPs that we have to do, adding a threshold there like they did the mixed use meter thing with the 500,000, gallons per year? Because I just feel like we're going to be sending out all these BMPs to customers that just, use 10 units every 2 months because they're still in the top 20% of that classification of CII. It seems like there should be some other threshold or something else added to this standard. If anybody else has a better idea.
Yeah, I've made a recommendation. One of the things that I included in our comment letter is for our area, some agencies CII is a very small portion of their water use, and so spending a lot of effort on CII is not going to result in a whole lot of water savings. And so having a threshold for that would be helpful to make sure, again, that we're not spending a whole lot of resources to not save water.
Thank you for summarizing that perfectly, Elizabeth.
Yeah.
And Gabriella Olson.
Yes, was there any update on the residential agriculture? You know, not ag, but you know, just homeowners that have ag trees on their property and are under residential use?
There was no update from the landscape area measurements. So if you recall from the landscape area measurements that the DWR did for residential, they didn't measure agricultural over a certain size, and so that was excluded from the landscape area. There is a variance that's proposed, and it was proposed by DWR, and the state board isn't recommending to change it, that you can go in and provide information about your agriculture and get that added to your target. There is a variance that they're adding in there for edible plants. So I think it's going to be trying to figure out what makes sense between their edible plant variance, their ag variances. You know, what do you have information that you can provide to them, and what data you can use? But they didn't specifically address changes to any of the ag variances. Like that. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things I've noticed with, like, they put everything on a variance. A lot of the things have now moved to variance, and now the INI, you know, the agency's having to document and prove that people are using that 20% of the INI. I think it's put a lot of burden on districts that are smaller. You know, how do we track that? And on the variances, if they don't add up to a 5%, you've now spent all that time, you know, trying to document a variance that might only come in at 4%. So I just think it's just very data intensive and adds a lot of burden on staff.
I agree with you, and I think it's not just water supplier staff, but it's also state board staff. You know, one of the things that's in the methodology that DWR recommended is that water suppliers have to get approval to increase their landscape area measurements for any new development. You know, those measurements were done several years ago now, and so if you have any new development, having to go through the additional step of getting it approved by a state agency is gonna you know, add resources on both sides of the equation. And so I think, again, making those arguments that this is not, you know, we're not talking about a lot of water. You know, we're not talking about the huge, you know, agencies with a lot of resources. We're talking about oftentimes they're talking about small resources. And again, anytime that you have a concern like that, it would be great to hear from you, or to let the board hear from you that that's a concern. Like I said, they want to know what's really impacting agencies, and they've told us that they're tired of hearing from the same people all the time. And so, you know, we've explained that not everybody has the resources to come up to a state board meeting, but again, it's something that if we have specific complaints or concerns, that we can bring them up to the state board and ask them to address them.
Well, you know, our district has signed on to one of the coalition letters that was out there. We didn't send one individually because the coalition letter really addressed a lot of our concerns. I mean, we do plan to make comments, I believe, when they start their regulatory process. We're very concerned about the changes to the INI.
Yeah. Yep, I agree. Anybody else?
There's one thing in the chat, but it's kind of long. So I'm just gonna let people read that. And then we can move on and catch that later.
Next up.
This is Augustine again. Should we hold out any hope for indoor, that the feasibility study that the state board said that they would undertake for that 2030 standard? Should we hold out any hope for the results of that?
I would, you know, for, you're talking about the feasibility of the indoor standard?
Yeah, the 42.
Yeah, I mean, I think that yes, I would definitely not dismiss it. One of the things that's been talked about is that among water suppliers is that when the next time around, when DWR does their study, is that we as water suppliers kind of need to do a parallel study so that we kind of have some data to share as well. And so I think between those efforts, we may be able to see how that 42 gallons per capita per day indoor kind of impacts different agencies. And just from what I looked at it, it's going to impact different agencies differently, obviously, because some water suppliers already have a lower water use, and some have a ways to go to get to that 42. And so a lot of the standards are being put into place using averages. That's why there's a lot of variances. And the concerning part is that all of the work seems to be on the part of the water suppliers to go in and calculate those variances. And another thing that we're asking the state board to do is to put in the regulations that before anyone is penalized for non-compliance, that the state offer that technical assistance to look at the landscape area measurements, make sure they're accurate, you know, look at the variances. Was there something that was missed? You know, is somebody, you know, asking the question, did you not meet your target because the target was wrong, or because, you know, you have some you need to reduce water demand. So
All right. So in the interest of time, we've addressed all of our questions, and we should probably move on.
okay, all right. So there was a board workshop in March. The rulemaking is anticipated to start next month. We'll see if that happens. Adoption in 23-24, which sounds like they're already planning not to meet their end of 2023 deadline. And the rule would become effective in summer of 2024. What they're looking at right now. Just a really quick, this is what a couple meetings ago, we looked at the objective tool that the State Water Resources Control Board has put out. They're kind of using those calculations and those assumptions to see who would meet the objectives and who wouldn't. And so these are what they're sharing with the board. And so as you look at where you are, we identified that there's some limitations in that objective tool. Make sure that you can, you know, if you see something wrong, let the state board staff know. There's a link on the website, and so that we know where people are and actually meeting the objective. Next slide. And just really quick, as we head into our breakout groups, things to kind of think about is what data you're going to need moving forward. Everyone's going to need CII measurements, landscape measurements. Everybody's going to need to identify where their dedicated meters are and their mixed use meters are. Depending on your circumstances, you may need to identify special landscape areas. You may need to identify non-functional areas, and you may need to start collecting information from all your variances. And then also how you're going to comply with those CII requirements, your classifications, the BMPs, and all the reporting that's required, and anything else. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michelle.
Great. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. So we are going to do two things. We are going to do a live survey now. We're going to put that, Nikki's going to put that in the chat, and we have a 3 Google survey question for you. If you take a minute, there's only 3 questions. It should be quite a quick. We just wanted to get a feeling for how people want to move forward, which area is the most concern that you just heard, and also what are you thinking about a comment letter at this point. And then we are going to do a few breakout rooms. So I want you to do the survey now. We're going to put in the chat. Go ahead and take a minute to do it. And then after we finish the survey, we are going to do some breakout rooms. During the breakout rooms, we will be compiling your answers. So if you fill in the Google survey, then you'll get the bonus of getting the answers right after the breakout rooms. And so that's our plan. We're going to do 2 things with the last few minutes of our meeting. We are going to do the survey, give you some results after the breakout room, and we are going to do about 15 minutes per breakout room. We have 3 of them today. And so based on your area of choice, and you can also change between rooms, you will be able to choose which room you prefer. The first breakout room is I still have questions on the components and proposed changes. The second breakout room is I want to discuss a concern or have a case study to share on how this impacts our utility. And the third one is let's talk implementation plans to meet the requirement. So go ahead, take a minute to fill in the survey, please. After, I'm going to give you another 2 minutes or so to do that. Then after you have filled in your survey, we will open up the breakout rooms and let you choose which room you would like to attend. Each of the rooms will have 2 moderators who are there to kind of help address these topics, but really the breakout rooms will not be recorded. That's on purpose, and there will be no notes. So it's your permission to speak freely and to share your opinion and or get your questions answered. So with that, I look forward to giving you another minute to do your breakout room, and or I'm going to check the chat as well and see if there's any other questions. The Google form has been posted, so you should be able to see it in the chat now. And then I will feed back a comment to Elizabeth while we do that. There was a couple comments in there that I will comment back to Elizabeth, and then we'll go ahead to our breakout rooms. So there was one comment from William McDonald saying the state board seems open to making the 5% variances cumulative at the last meeting. So that was a comment. And then Jean said maybe the threshold should be agency size, like 15,000 meters or population of 50,000. So those were 2 comments that came in the chat while we were proceeding. So that is catches you up to speed on the comments from the group. So with that, I hope you have filled in your Google survey. You can still finish it in while we open up those breakout rooms. So again, we'll go into our breakout rooms for about 15 minutes. Then we'll come back, report back what everyone was talking about, and then we will give you the results to the survey. So let's go ahead, and we have opened up those breakout rooms. So again, you will get to choose which room you would like, and there are 3 of them. So go ahead and choose which room you would like to go to. So thank you everyone who filled in the Google survey, and thank you to Nikki who was able to combine all the results while we were in our breakout rooms. So here is a summary right here. So we had, hold on, sorry about that. I could just go all the way to the end. So we had 29 people actually take the survey. And what I'm going to show is 3 different summaries from that. So the first summary that I saw is what changes or approaches to the proposed revisions are you most worried about? And it looks like the first item is kind of what I heard in the implementation room. The cost to implement the staffing, the capital, software, and incentives. 82% of you voted for that, or 29 people voted for that. And then also high on that list is lack of state provided technical resources for implementation and planning. I heard that as well, especially on the CII side. I heard concern, lack of knowledge to do the BMPs on the CI side. That came up as well. Real unintended impacts, rates, environmental, water quality, and economic concerns was the third highest as well. So those were our top 3 responses of areas of concern. So thank you for that, because what we're trying to do through these workshops is trying to hear you, listen to you, and address some of your concerns. So that will feed back into our discussions. And then we had a tie for 4th place between residential outdoor budget reduction to 0.55 and the CI BMPs thresholds, and then there were BMPs required. So those tend to be I guess the top 5 things that people said, and 0 people said we have no concerns. So there we go. And on the bottom it says other concerns. There was 3 responses: helping residents through the turf rebate program, new process of verification for the INI 20% buffer, and compliance timeline were other. So thank you for that. And then our survey results question 2 was, do you plan to write a comment letter to the state board after they released updated information in late May? And so half the group, or 51%, is unsure. And then after that, it's a whole set of information. So most people are unsure because another 8% need to read the aqua letter before they sign it. 11% said yes, we'll be a signatory on a regional letter. So over half are still deciding, and then from there we have a kaleidoscope of answers that you can see. We had a total of 35 responses on the survey for your context. So thank you everyone who took it, and hopefully this workshop was helpful, and the additional information and the aqua letter, if they send it out, will hopefully be helpful in navigating if you want to write a letter or not. Again, the comment period is supposed to open in May, so you still have a little bit of time if you want to navigate through the options in your choice to submit or not. Survey results for question 3, we have 4 of them here. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to feed these all back to San Diego, and they can go ahead and try and address all these comments. One of them is just thank you for holding the workshops. I appreciate the guidance support. I like that one. That's the end, last one, and a good place to end. And regional contracts and methods to obtain data regionally. That one came up in breakout number 3. And then the additional 2 we will try and address via email, unless Elizabeth, you want to address any of them right now. And this is our last slide. And if you're talking, you're on mute.
Yeah. Yeah, we can definitely get back to you on all of these. Yes, there's grants out there that can help help a water supplier implement low-income household turf programs. And then I like the idea of the 101 on land data, and then regional contracts is something we're working on here. And thank you for coming to our workshop. So that's all we have. We'll answer in more detail later.
Great. We do have a resource cheat sheet for you. We know there's a ton of information out there, and some people are really getting to the point they can't quite figure out where everything's located. So we've tried to create our best at a cheat sheet for you of where everything is located. Yes, the slides will be shared out, and yes, this will be included. So hopefully this is helpful for you, and also something that you requested in previous workshops. So we're happy to share that out to you. Peer-to-peer is going to be happening the last couple days of May and the first week in June. So feel free to sign up for that if you're a CalWEP member, or even if you're not. There will be a section on the legislation. There will be almost a whole entire day and a whole track on this exact topic. So if you want more, and if you want to go more in depth and you found this helpful, and you want to have more dialogue or more about regional partnerships, please feel free to join. I will be there, and a lot of San Diego staff will be there, and we're happy to connect with you there and answer any additional questions in person. So hope to see you there. And with that, I hope you have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you again for joining us, and hope you can join the next one. And questions are welcome. Feel free to email them to Debbie and or to myself, and we're happy to address them. Thank you
And
so
we'll
much.
send the link. We'll send the link out to everybody from the meeting today.
Yes, for the recording and the slides. And with that, I hope you have a great rest of your afternoon, and thank you for coming. Hope you could join us for the next one.
Thank you.